Imagine waking up one day and realizing the person you thought you were is gone. Not in a dramatic, earth-shattering way, but quietly, like a house you've lived in for years suddenly feels unfamiliar. This is what they call ego death, a moment, or a series of moments, where the identity you've clung to, the one built from years of habits, ambitions, and masks, simply dissolves. Maybe it came through a spiritual awakening, a glimpse of something vast that made your old priorities feel small. Maybe it was a crisis, a loss, a betrayal, or a moment of raw honesty with yourself that broke the facade. Whatever it was, you felt it. The world shifted. The stories you told yourself about who you are and what you want fell apart. For a fleeting moment, there was peace, a sense of freedom in letting go. But then, the silence crept in. The drive that once pushed you forward, chasing goals, seeking approval, building a life, faded. You're left in a strange, empty space, wondering, if I've seen the truth, why do I feel so lost? Why can't I find the energy to care anymore? This isn't what we're told to expect. We hear that spiritual awakening is supposed to light us up, fill us with purpose, and send us soaring into a life of meaning. The books, the gurus, the social media posts, they paint a picture of bliss, of constant inspiration. But for so many, the reality is different. It's disorienting. It's heavy. The things that used to matter, career milestones, social status, even personal dreams, feel like they belong to someone else. I think of a man named Daniel, someone I met years ago at a retreat. He'd spent his life climbing the corporate ladder, driven by a need to prove himself. Then, during a meditation, something broke open. He saw through the illusion of his carefully curated life, the endless striving for validation. It was profound, he said, like touching the edge of eternity. But months later, he was adrift. He'd quit his job, stopped planning, and spent hours staring at the walls of his apartment. I thought awakening would give me clarity, he told me. Instead, I don't know who I am or why I'm doing anything. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist who dove deeper into the human psyche than most, had a name for this unraveling: the death of the persona. The persona is the mask we wear, the version of ourselves we present to the world, shaped by expectations, fears, and the need to fit in. When it collapses, whether through awakening, crisis, or introspection, we're left face to face with something rawer, something truer. But Jung didn't see this as the end. He saw it as the beginning of a journey he called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating all parts of yourself, conscious and unconscious, into a unified self. The problem is, this journey starts in a place that feels like a void. The goals that once fueled you. Success, recognition, even spiritual ideals, lose their pull because they were tied to the persona, not the deeper self. Your ego, the part of you that loves structure and certainty, is disoriented. It's not gone, it's just lost its script. And without a new one, motivation vanishes. This void isn't a mistake, though it's easy to think it is. Our world doesn't value stillness. We're taught to keep moving, to hustle, to fill every moment with purpose. So when you find yourself unable to care, unable to act, it feels like failure. But Jung would disagree. He saw this phase as sacred, a necessary pause where the psyche recalibrates. He called it enantiodromia, the moment when things swing into their opposite. Your drive, once fueled by external validation, swings toward a quiet, almost unsettling stillness. It's not apathy. It's not depression, though it can mimic it. It's your soul clearing the deck, making space for something new. The old motivations. Proving yourself, being seen, achieving, don't work because they were built for a version of you that no longer exists. You're not lazy. You're in transition, standing at the edge of something deeper. What makes this phase so hard is the temptation to fight it. You might try to force yourself back into the old patterns, to chase goals that no longer resonate just to feel something familiar. Or you might numb out, scrolling through life, avoiding the emptiness. But Jung believed the psyche is wiser than that. It knows what it's doing. It sends signals, dreams, fleeting impulses, moments of curiosity, to guide you toward what's next. The catch is, you have to listen. Not with your logical mind, trained to demand clarity and results, but with something softer, more intuitive. I remember a woman named Lila who went through this. After a profound spiritual experience, she felt unmoored, like nothing mattered. She stopped painting, something she'd loved for years, because it felt pointless. But one day, while walking in the park, she noticed a leaf caught in the wind, spinning in a way that felt oddly significant. She went home and sketched it, not because she should, but because it felt alive. That small act opened a door. She started painting again, not for praise, but because it was a way to connect with that quiet pull inside her. This is where Jung's concept of the shadow comes in. The shadow is everything you've pushed away, the emotions, desires, and truths you've judged as unacceptable. After ego death, the shadow rises, not to torment you, but to be integrated. That numbness you feel. It might be grief you never let yourself process. That lack of motivation. It could be your soul rejecting a life that was never truly yours. Jung believed that resisting these feelings only deepens the stagnation. But when you let them in, when you sit with the discomfort, the sadness, the confusion, something shifts. You're not fixing yourself. You're allowing yourself to be whole. This isn't about forcing motivation through affirmations or productivity hacks. It's about surrendering to the void and trusting that it's not empty, it's fertile. It's where the self, the deeper core of who you are, begins to emerge. The self, as Jung described it, isn't your personality or your roles. It's the totality of you, your light and your dark, your conscious mind and your unconscious depths. It's the part of you that's connected to something bigger, something universal. And it doesn't care about your 5-year plan or your social media following. It cares about truth, about expression, about living in alignment with your essence. When you start listening to it, you notice subtle shifts. Maybe you feel a pull to write, not for an audience, but to make sense of your thoughts. Maybe you're drawn to a conversation, a place, or a small act that feels inexplicably right. These aren't goals in the traditional sense. They're nudges, whispers from the self that guide you toward a new kind of motivation, one that's not about achieving but about being. This new motivation feels different. It's not loud or urgent. It's not about proving yourself or checking boxes. It's quieter, steadier, like a river finding its course. Jung called this living the symbolic life, where you start to trust the language of your soul, your dreams, your intuition, the synchronicities that seem to point you somewhere. For Daniel, this looked like starting a journal. He didn't know why he was writing, but the act of putting words on paper felt like a conversation with something deeper. Over time, those words turned into ideas, then actions, not forced, but organic. He started volunteering, not to fill a void, but because it resonated. He began to see his life not as a race to win but as a canvas to create. The challenge is that this process takes patience, and patience isn't something our world celebrates. We're conditioned to want instant results, to measure our worth by what we produce. But the self doesn't work on that timeline. It moves in cycles, in rhythms that ebb and flow. Jung believed that trying to skip the void, to rush back to action, is a form of spiritual bypassing. It's avoiding the hard work of facing the shadow, of letting the old self die fully so the new one can be born. When you resist the stillness, you block the very energy you're seeking. But when you lean into it, when you let yourself feel the weight, the uncertainty, the quiet, you create space for something authentic to grow. This is where small actions become powerful. You don't need to know your life's purpose to start moving. You don't need a grand plan. Start with what feels true, even if it's small. Maybe it's rearranging your desk, taking a walk, or writing a single sentence that captures what you're feeling. These acts aren't about productivity, they're about connection. They're ways of saying yes to the self, of honoring the part of you that's trying to speak. Jung called this the transcendent function, the bridge between your conscious mind and your unconscious, where new possibilities are born. It's not about forcing clarity but about recognizing it when it arrives, often in the form of a quiet impulse or a moment of resonance. As you begin to move in this way, you'll notice something else: the ego isn't the enemy. Jung never said to destroy it. The ego is your interface with the world, the part of you that sets boundaries, makes decisions, and navigates life. The problem comes when it pretends to be all of you, when it disconnects from the self. After ego death, your task isn't to abandon the ego but to align it with the deeper truth of who you are. This is where motivation transforms. You're not chasing success to fill a void. You're not creating to be seen. You're acting because it feels honest, because it's an expression of the self. For Lila, this meant painting not for galleries but for the joy of it. For Daniel, it meant building a life that felt like his own, not someone else's idea of success. This alignment doesn't mean you'll never feel lost again. You're still human. Doubt, fatigue, and confusion will still come. But what changes is the way you meet them. Instead of fighting your emotions, you listen to them. Instead of judging your stillness, you trust it. You start to see every feeling, sadness, fear, even laziness, as a messenger, carrying clues about what your soul needs. Maybe your tiredness is asking for rest. Maybe your fear is pointing to a boundary you need to set. Maybe your lack of motivation is your psyche saying, this isn't your path anymore. When you stop resisting, you free up energy. You stop leaking vitality into shame or self-criticism. And slowly, you start to move, not because you have to, but because you want to. This movement isn't about hustle. It's about flow. It's about letting your actions arise from a place of truth rather than obligation. You might find yourself drawn to create a poem, a drawing, a conversation that feels alive. You might say no to things that drain you, even if they look good on paper. You might follow a curiosity that doesn't make sense but feels right. This is the self at work, guiding you toward a life that's not about performance but about presence. Jung believed that when you live this way, you're not just surviving, you're participating in something larger. You're bringing your unique truth into the world, whether through art, relationships, or simply the way you move through your day. The beauty of this process is that it's not about becoming someone new. It's about uncovering who you've always been. The self was there all along, hidden beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and expectation. Ego death strips those layers away, leaving you raw but also open. And in that openness, you find a new kind of motivation, not the kind that pushes you to prove yourself, but the kind that pulls you toward meaning. It's not loud or flashy. It's quiet, steady, and deeply personal. It's the feeling of writing a sentence that feels true, of helping someone not because you should but because it matters, of choosing a path because it resonates, not because it's expected. Living from the self doesn't mean you'll have all the answers. It doesn't mean you'll never doubt yourself or feel stuck again. But it does mean you'll trust the process. You'll know that the void, the stillness, the uncertainty, they're not signs of failure. They're part of the cycle, the ebb before the flow. Jung called this the symbolic life because it's guided by the language of the soul, dreams, intuitions, moments of connection that feel like they mean something, even if you can't explain why. You start to notice these signals everywhere. A song that hits you differently, a conversation that sparks an idea, a dream that lingers when you wake. These are the threads that weave your new path, not through force but through resonance. As you move forward, you'll find that your relationship with action changes. You're not striving to fill a void or escape discomfort. You're responding to what feels alive. This might look like starting a project that excites you, even if it's small. It might mean setting boundaries to protect your energy. It might mean resting without guilt, knowing that rest is as sacred as creation. For some, it's about returning to something they loved as a child, drawing, writing, exploring, before the world told them what they should do. For others, it's about serving in a way that feels true, whether through teaching, healing, or simply being present for someone else. Whatever it is, it's yours. It's not borrowed from someone else's vision of success. It's rooted in the self, in the truth of who you are. This journey isn't linear. There will be days when the void feels heavy again, when you question everything. That's okay. Jung never promised a straight path. He saw life as a spiral, circling deeper into wholeness with each turn. The key is to keep listening, to keep trusting the small, quiet impulses that guide you. Ask yourself, what feels true right now? Not what you should do, not what looks good, but what resonates. Maybe it's a walk in the rain. Maybe it's a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's a single word you write down because it feels important. These small acts are the seeds of a new life, one that's not about achieving but about embodying. And here's the paradox: when you stop chasing motivation, you find it. When you stop trying to be someone, you become yourself. The self doesn't need you to perform. It needs you to listen. It needs you to show up, not perfectly, but honestly. And when you do, you'll notice something beautiful: the world starts to respond. Opportunities appear, not because you force them, but because you're aligned with what's true. People are drawn to you, not because you're trying to impress, but because you're real. Your actions, even the small ones, carry weight because they come from a place of authenticity. This is the gift of ego death. It's not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a truer one. You're not here to rebuild the old self, the one that hustled for approval or chased goals that didn't fit. You're here to uncover the self that's been waiting, the one that knows what it means to live, not just survive. It's a life that's messy, human, and deeply alive. It's a life where sadness is a teacher, where stillness is a gift, where every step feels like a conversation with the universe. So if you're in the void right now, if you're wondering why you can't find your spark, know this: you're not lost. You're becoming. And the path forward isn't about pushing harder, it's about listening deeper, trusting softer, and moving when it feels true. That's where the magic lives. That's where you come alive.